Fairly often, I get asked questions about how I got started podcasting with the Breaking Math podcast, and I'll often be asked this question by those who are thinking of starting their own podcast. That is, people who are looking to tell a story or share their unique wisdom with a larger audience or their passions, or maybe just advertise their business or services. I usually like to start this conversation by either showing off or telling about our preferred podcasting platform, ZenCastr. ZenCastr is essentially an all-in-one podcast hosting platform. On this platform, you can do everything from recording your episodes to editing your audio and video files to distributing your podcast to all podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever else podcasts are played. Now, there's more. When I first began podcasting, I used to get very nervous about how I would sound. I would sometimes stutter or have awkward pauses or other audio blemishes in my recordings. Now, ZenCastr has a new suite of AI tools in their post-production process that make you sound really smooth. They automatically take out any of the ums or ahs in your recording. Also, they automatically take out any of the awkward pauses in your discussions. The tools will also help you set the right loudness and balance all the levels while reducing any background noise, all with the click of a button. Doesn't sound too bad, does it? You really should check it out. Really, the world needs to hear what you have to say. In fact, I'm going to give you a code below to help give you a large discount. It's all one word: Breaking Math. Go to ZenCastr.com/pricing and use my code Breaking Math, and you'll get 30% off of your first month in any ZenCastr paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experience I do for all my podcasting content needs. It's time to share your. People very often ask me both how and why I started my podcasting journey. Well, as an engineer, I'm frankly very passionate about math. I wanted to find somewhere to share stories of great mathematicians from Archimedes to Alan Turing and everyone in between. And for that reason, I want to tell you a little bit about my preferred hosting platform, which is ZenCastr. Now, before I continue, this is usually the conversation I have with anybody who is wanting to start their own podcast. I know there are so many people out there with passions that they want to share with the world or unique knowledge that they're just looking for a platform to start with. And ZenCastr is a wonderful all-in-one platform. What I mean by that is you can do your recording and your editing and use AI to create a transcript and distribute to all platforms, including Apple Podcasts or Spotify or anywhere else where podcasts are played. For anybody like me who might worry at first about what you might sound like on an audio recording, ZenCastr's post-production process makes you sound really, really smooth. It automatically removes any of the ums or ahs in your recording. It removes any of the awkward pauses in conversations, and it also helps you to set the right podcast loudness and levels while reducing any background noise, all with the click of a button. It couldn't be easier. Go to ZenCastr.com/pricing and use my code BREAKINGMath, and you'll get 30% off your first month in any ZenCastr paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experience I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story. All episodes of the Breaking Math podcast are available commercial-free on Patreon at patreon.com/breakingmath, starting at the $5 a month tier. This week, we are featuring special guest Levi McClain, who joins us to talk about the mathematics behind music, audio engineering, sound, neuroscience, and the human sense of fear. Without further ado, here's this week's episode.
What makes a sound scary? Well, I was curious about this, so I built an instrument specifically designed for horror music, and then I proceeded to rescore the entirety of the 1922 horror classic Nosferatu in order to figure that out.
Without further ado, I will introduce our guest, Levi McClain. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on.
Levi, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. I'm ecstatic to have you on. I can't believe you're here because I literally just saw your content and said, hey, have you ever thought about artificial intelligence applications to this? And you responded. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. It's always great to talk about things just outside of my own discipline. So thanks for reaching out.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So you have a whole lot of content. I watched almost all of it, and I tried my best to reduce it into something that we could talk about in this one episode. It's a long outline, so who knows? We may have to do this in a two-parter, but that's okay. I think that Levi and I have been on the phone preparing for this episode, I want to say for about 3.5 hours. Did you say that? That's probably correct?
Yeah, that's probably about it. We've had some good times on the
Oh yeah, yeah. So
that sounds weird.
Before we, it's all good, man. We've had some good. No, we have had. Don't be ashamed of that. There is no shame. There is no shame in our bromance, Levi. I think it is a beautiful thing. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, dude. Yeah. So
it's a beautiful union.
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. That's how a sharing brotherhood of science and knowledge. And for our listeners, I always talk about this book. I actually got Levi a copy of this book. I think you ended up buying it yourself. I owe you for that, but next time, right? I'll buy you a few drinks. Yeah, this is the book that we kind of based the discussion on, which is A Brief History of Intelligence by Max Bennett, where in this case we will zero in on audio engineering. Before we dive into the content, I have a quick, awesome story that illustrates the power of audio engineering and knowledge in that area. As I mentioned earlier, I had many conversations with Levi about the science of audio engineering and machine intelligence. And what I loved is that we kept asking each other questions back and forth and had an opportunity to share our knowledge. I was on the phone with Levi when I was driving to this studio, and I was walking in. I said, "Hey, Levi, I'm in studio now." And Levi said, "I know." And I said, "How? What?" I thought, are you following me or something, or are you tracking me or something? It left me really weirded out. And basically, Levi explained, and I'll let him take over this point in a second. He basically explained that the changes in my own voice from when I was in the car to when I was walking on the street to when I walked into the studio, he could tell absolutely just based on the echoes and what he heard in the sound itself. That freaked me out. Levi, can you tell us a little bit about that? What was it like hearing me?
Yeah, sure. So I guess it's probably something that it seems like a superpower, but it's really not. I think most audio engineers end up developing something like this because we're sitting around and we're mixing sounds all day, and we're in studio, so we get really accustomed to listening to the room of a sound because that changes so much of the sound of the instruments that we play. Singing in a cathedral is going to sound vastly different than singing in a little bedroom closet. And so we kind of developed this keen ear for being able to hear things about the room, certain qualities like I can tell, generally speaking, about how large a room is just with my eyes closed, if I walk into it. And then also with that, we can kind of be able to discern certain sounds of the material of the walls. What is the structure that we're in made out of? And it's this really interesting and kind of cool things that humans can do that I don't think we utilize very often. But in talking to you, I immediately thought of the applications of how can we implement something like this into artificial intelligence? So, would it be possible to take a microphone, put it in the middle of the room, train it on a bunch of different rooms, and then from the ambient sound of that room, could an artificial intelligence, machine learning system be able to identify qualities about that room? I think that's a really, really neat thing that I don't think has been explored yet.
That is absolutely incredible, and I think you're right. And that's it's funny because these conversations about how you can garner or how you can gather information about your surroundings forces us to realize there's so much that we don't know, and that we don't know that we don't know. Pardon that a bit of an awkward phrase here, but that's absolutely true. You spoke of audio engineers who learn that skill over time, and suddenly it just became aware that your brain could pick up patterns in these things, and you learn to associate them. And with that, you suddenly have this ability to know information about your surroundings. It sends a bit of chills down my spine. I'm not going to lie, but at the same time, it's absolutely amazing. You talked about an AI application with this, and basically, so an AI, hypothetically, we could train an AI with the technology we have in microphones to pick up a wide variety of sounds that are outside of what humans can hear. And based on your own experience on what you can decipher just from the frequencies you're able to hear, as you said earlier, forgive me for just restating what you said. I like to do that. It makes me feel smart. You could learn the size of environments. You could learn properties of the materials. It's incredible. And I think the example we used is, like if I choose a nice, sunny day scenario, I'm not talking about a Terminator scenario here, but a nice scenario where you've got a robot that is responsible for being something like a firefighter robot, and the visual spectrum is blocked from smoke or from debris. It makes you wonder what information it could get just from audio signals itself. And yeah, you brought up the possibility that there's just a lot that you can get. I don't want to go too down this rabbit hole, but I brought this up with some friends of mine who talked about this is a very developed science in areas such as sonar, like with submarines and things like that. So there's a lot of research in various areas on sound. So it's amazing. Now, without further ado, I'd like to actually deep dive into your talk on fear. That was the video that we opened up with. And can you tell us a little bit about, tell us the story of why you decided to focus on fear? What was the process like when you put that script together, both in terms of your research and just your inspiration? And we saw you completely destroy a violin. Do you feel sorry about that at all?
Not at all. The violin had it coming. So I originally started this idea when I was watching the 1920s horror film Nosferatu, which is it's like a knockoff Dracula film from the 20s. It's a silent film, and I noticed that something interesting about it, which is that I didn't find it scary whatsoever, and all the people I was watching with also was like, this is just kind of boring, honestly. And then I was kind of doing some research into it, and then reading a little bit about horror film history, and I came to understand that the original soundtrack for the Nosferatu film was actually lost because I guess the widow of Bram Stoker, who was the original author of the Dracula films, sued the director for Nosferatu, and there was a court order to like destroy all the movies, and so basically all the copies got burned, and the original soundtrack was lost. I thought that was a really interesting opportunity to explore this idea of scary sounds in a way where I can see if I can make Nosferatu scary just through sound, and also kind of have a chance to rescore a really iconic movie.
My gosh, that's incredible. That's cool. So, quick question here: have you submitted that YouTube that you made to any artistic competitions or any documentary? Okay, there's got to be, and if there's not one, I will make one. I will reach out to my colleagues in the Department of Education, or I will find colleagues there, and I will insist that we met at some conference, and I'll say, you have to have, an award show for educational content. Let's make it a thing, okay? Note to self. I'll do that. Okay, so that video has a lot of neuroscience that you discuss, and actually, I watched the entire video. And I filled up, I want to say, 6 pages of a notebook with every term and every concept that you put in it. As you mentioned, some specific mathematical concepts. I'd like to bring those up here right now. If you don't mind, I'm going to scroll on my fun outline here, and we'll go right down to it. Okay, so you talk a lot about what do humans find that is pleasing and calm, and what do they find that is frightening or disturbing, or things that would cause our nervous system to react. Is there a mathematical description of that kind of thing?
Yeah. So the way I like to approach it is most topics in psychoacoustics are quite complex because sound is so multidimensional. So there's different ways to describe a sound, and kind of all of it comes together in its entirety to describe a sound as a whole. So with that video and this project, I was trying to figure out more so like, what is there something specific? Is there any one dimension of those of the quality of the sound that contributes more so to something being frightening than anything else? And what I came to understand is specifically in certain types of fear, mainly quick fear. So there's quick fear and there's slow fear. I'll discuss quick fear. Maybe we can jump on the slow fear a little bit later. One of the qualities in the anatomy of a sound, if you will, is called roughness. Now, roughness is basically a description of how quickly a sound rises in volume and amplitude. And if it has a high degree of roughness, typically humans will assign that kind of sound to being scary. So in conversation, roughness will fluctuate, like 3 to 5 to maybe 10 times per second. And then in something like a human scream, it's much more. So like you're talking 30, 150 times per second or something like that. And so we can kind of start to classify certain sounds mathematically through that one dimension as scary or not scary. And so that's one part of the puzzle.
That's fascinating. One of the things that I wondered about, and I think you and I either talked a bit about or I wrote in the side notes on my notebook is, okay, so our ears working away, or rather our ears plus our brains and our central nervous system differentiate the frightening sound based on the hertz, or the amount of amplitude changes. And I think from the video you said the scream is literally between 30 and 150 hertz in a scream. It made me think about all the sounds that we hear in nature, or that any living thing would hear in nature, and how unique the scream is, and possibly how it evolved to be a unique signaling thing that there's danger. You know what I mean? Like it's just a very unique thing. And I ask this because with machine learning learns certain things based on a reward function. And well, first of all, machines don't have a self-preservation instinct. Machines aren't worried about predators chasing it. So its reward functions are a little different. That said, whether it's machine learning or biological things, you learn things for a reason. And in the case of, say, Darwinian evolution, you learn things like the reward function is you get to keep living and produce offspring. And the punishment function, if you will, is obviously you get into in danger or die. So I don't mean to be morbid here, but that sort of explains the form and function of fear. I just found it interesting that we specifically evolved to hear this characteristic of sound, and it makes me think like, would we have identified something else as scary if the circumstances were different? Like, what is scary is a learned behavior, at least I assume, more so than an absolute, this is scary, So
yeah. So you bring up a couple interesting points there, which is that one, I think a lot of this understanding of what makes something sound scary, and maybe just fear in general, maybe that you could apply this out to encompass a wider range here, but specifically in talking about like fearful sounds, I think it comes down to anything that breaks with expectation. So in bioacoustics, this would be called a nonlinearity. So if you, in sticking with the example of a human scream, versus human talking. If you're in a room with a bunch of people and you're talking, and then someone screams in the back of the room, that breaks from expectation. You don't expect to hear that in a crowded room, and so everyone's attention is drawn towards it, right? So that's an example of a nonlinearity. It's essentially something that breaks from expectation.
That's right. Yeah, and actually, I apologize, dude. I'm sorry. Please continue. I just cut you off like a T-bone car accident.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
Okay. Yeah, that would definitely. I tried to scare you there just to show it. Yeah, I'm just kidding. Okay. Now in the video, I didn't even think of this. I didn't bring up a diagram. There's beautiful diagrams in your video. There is phenomenal pictures, and for that reason, maybe our listeners should just go watch your video so they can see your great diagrams. That said, there's a whole section on a fear short circuit that is based on when your brain or your ears and your nervous system hear a sound that it has identified as the trigger for a fear response. Can you walk us through the the fear short circuit process in our brains?
Yeah, sure. So it's essentially a 5 neuron acoustic startle circuit is what it's referred to. And again, this goes into the kind of fear that's immediate, the scream at the corner of the room, which articulates your attention towards it. So what's basically how it works is pressure wave, sound wave will hit your ear. And they'll go from your ventral. Sorry, I have a little note here. A ventral cochlear nucleus, and which encodes intensity and temporal information, so where the sound is coming from. It'll then go through your lateral lemniscus to your reticular pontine nucleus, and at this point, that sound has articulated your eye movement and has brought your attention to the direction of the scary sound. The sound wave then travels through spinal interneurons to your motor neurons, and at this point, you are fully aware of the threat and you have completely reacted. And what I think is interesting about this is that it's such a fast process, right? And it only takes about 10 milliseconds to like articulate your attention towards something that's fearful. And what's interesting, I think, is when you juxtapose that with visual information. If you look at something like maybe a scary bear, or someone coming at you with a knife, or something morbid like that, it's a much slower process, even though light travels faster than sound. It's very interesting because you'll see the threat, and then your brain has to go through a decoding process to be able to recognize that it's a threat. Remember that, like, oh yeah, bears are scary, we should avoid them, and then your brain has to decode all this information to make you aware and present of the threat. It's because the visual process is a chemical one. There's a chemical conversion that has to happen with light, whereas the 5 neuron acoustic startle circuit is a very quick process. It happens immediately because it's a mechanical process, and it only has to go through 5 synapses. So
So yeah, what I really enjoyed about this video is exactly you do a great job of breaking it down from, as you basically said earlier, the slow fear response and the fast fear response, and you broke it down systematically. As an engineer, I love this, because as an engineer, I think, oh, okay, as I'm seeing this, I see the process. I could literally code this myself if I wanted to. I could make my own robot from this if I wanted to. So all my engineers who are enjoying this episode, check out the video and think about how would you encode a fear response, if you had to for an assignment. Another bonus assignment, here I am assigning homework, right, is how would you train machine learning to do it? You'd have to identify a reward function that then identifies things to, shall we say, fear or avoid, or to follow and create criteria. I'm going to blaze through this part real quick because I just love all the detail here. So it basically says there's a fear response short circuit that is described in the video. It includes the ventricle cochlear nucleus, which encodes intensity and location to the origin of the sound. Look at that. That's the first point. I'll say it again. Ventricle cochlear nucleus, and the bits of information that it includes, I shouldn't say bits, the information that it encodes are intensity and location. So you have to have those two things first. But then the signal travels down, and it goes to a piece called the nucleus of the lateral lemniscus. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. I told you guys. I took crazy notes while I was watching this video, and then it goes to a part called the reticular pontine nucleus, where the eye movement and the attention is coordinated. This is amazing. It makes me think about how much science was done on this process to where we literally boiled it down system by system. But further, it literally talks about how information from one sense is integrated with other senses, and decisions are made in this shortcut function. Shortcuts are interesting because when you have a shortcut of information, you can make a rapid response, but you also don't have the full processing and the full decision-making potential of the entire brain. That's another conversation altogether, but we're talking about fear here, so it makes sense. And then it goes on to say, I'm sorry?
Yeah.
Oh,
I was going to say the processing comes later, and to that point, that's one of the core things that I like to do whenever I'm explaining something or understanding is like breaking it down so it's replicatable.
Yes.
I think that's so important because for me it's like you can tell me some information, but I'm the kind of guy who's always like, but why? But but why? How? I want to be able to build this like it's Legos, and I think it's really useful to explain processes in the brain, whether they're audio or otherwise, in that way where it's like, oh, well, we have the ability to, we have this idea of like, oh, this is what we think happens. It's 5 neurons that does this. Well, then you can actually replicate it and you can actually test it and then have a very fine-grained understanding of certain processes in the brain.
I think you could not have explained it better, and I think that's what a lot of engineers are thinking about when you have should we say a satisfaction of your own understanding. And I remember in my own life there was a point where I realized that. I think I was inspired by Richard Feynman. Actually, I don't know how familiar you are with Feynman. He has a story in his book, Surely You Must Be Joking, Mr. Feynman, where somebody just off the cuff asked him, he said, hey, when you take a strand of spaghetti and you bend the spaghetti, why does it always break in 2 places and not 1 place? And Feynman thought about it, and he could not let go of it. And just for his own satisfaction of understanding, he obsessed with that question for a long time until he had an answer. I can give you the spoiler if you want, or I can save that for your homework. What do you guys think?
No, I want to hear it.
Okay. So you can look up all kinds of stuff. You talk about when you add tension to a piece of spaghetti, where is the pressure going, and where is the instability in the spaghetti strand? I need to let you know real quick. Full disclosure: I had this conversation with an engineering consultant of mine, so I need to confirm this. Originally, I was thinking that it had something to do with the mathematics of nodes, and I'm sure as a sound engineer, you know what nodes are. A good example is if you're a child and you have a jump rope and you're spinning it, you can make one giant node, or if you spin it at a certain frequency, it'll split into 2 nodes, you know what I mean? Or however many nodes. My assumption originally is it had something to do with the energy going through it as you attempt to break it, and the nodes causing instability. That turned out to be wrong. I was just making it up as I went. So you got to watch out for smart sounding stuff that's just made up. Lots of folks do it. According to my boss, it was simply that if you put one end in a vise and you break the other end, or you bend the other end, it'll break at 1 point. But because you are applying pressure from your 2 hands, that's 2 points where you're applying pressure. The energy is kind of similar to the nodes in the sense that there's 2 fracture points. Sorry, long conversation. I wonder, we spent how long talking about that, and we were just obsessed with this problem. That's engineering for you. And that's also what I think is a human advantage, is that our striving for engineering isn't simply one explanation for a phenomenon. Human beings in our, I'll just go and say what we think of as our exceptionality. Maybe other, creatures do this too, but our level of understanding that we strive for is that, can we rebuild this phenomenon, and can we describe it with that amount of fidelity, that we can recreate it. That's why I made this show, in part because I want to do that with a lot of the unknowns in artificial intelligence. So yeah, we'll get onto that later. Now, once you have a systematic and kind of a scientific understanding for the fear response, you really know it very, very well. You can then apply your knowledge of a fear response to something really cool, like making a scary movie or a soundtrack, which is exactly what you did. I wanted to ask you about, some of the things that you went for specifically, like what sounds you chose, what you peppered in there, and like, what was your strategy in making a scary sound or scary music for this clip?
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways you can go about it, and having this knowledge of inputting non-linearities basically gets you scary sounds. There's a lot of things you can do that with that as a composer. Like so that involves some distorted sounds, and so if you distort sound, you're pushing up that quickness to get to a high amplitude. So that's the roughness quality that you're really taking advantage of. So I definitely use that, but also some like composition techniques, right? Because a nonlinearity, if we think of it, if we take a step back and just think of it as breaking from expectation, we can do certain things with that. So that's where the idea with the breaking the violin and turning it into this Frankenstein instrument kind of came into play. Part of that is to play on the movie a little bit, because it's essentially that the early horror movies. You have Dracula, you have Frankenstein, the Mummy, and those kind of things. So it's a little bit of a harken back to that, but it's also I think plays into the soul of the music a little bit, because what is Dracula? What is Nosferatu at its core? Well, it's a perversion of beauty, right? Mm-hmm. So it's something that's deeply human, that's been twisted into some like villainous monster. So to do that to a physical instrument, I think plays on that pretty well. And what you can do then is break the instrument, rebuild it into something a little bit perverse, and then just from that, your ears are very used and accustomed to hearing a violin as it is, which is this highly engineered structure, this instrument that we've been using in Western classical music for years and years and years and years. And to hear it in this new context, your ear will automatically pick up on, oh, this sounds different. It sounds like a violin, but it's not. Nosferatu looks like a human, but he's not. And so that plays on the fear a little bit. And then, we can also do certain things like play with dissonances. So that's taking chords that and adding these strange notes that probably shouldn't be in there in these interesting ways. And then also like putting certain things like the melody, if you put it way up high in an instrument, you're pushing the tolerance of that given instrument, and you're really leaning into the fact that, oh, this is not where this instrument is usually played. So if I'm playing at the very top range of a violin, it's discomforting to play as a player, but it's also discomforting to experience as the listener, because listeners, we have a really adept ear at being able to intuit discomfort, whether that's in music or in life. And so just playing on all of those things kind of goes into the mix when it came to this project.
Awesome. I have a lot of fun. I just have a lot of fun with using elements that can, cause fear or comfort when I'm doing my own art. It's kind of like, whenever I'm designing a Halloween costume, or I'm writing a script or trying to create a scary story. I don't know. It's just really fun. And one thing that I think is pretty common knowledge is you specifically said that this part of making something scary is the subversion of expectations, but also that is often a moving target, and what's scary in one time will then populate. That knowledge will become populated more in a. I'm sorry, I'm not saying that right. Once people become familiar with something, it has a diminishing effect on how scary it is. So I think you said in the video that when this movie first when it was first released, I think it was banned somewhere, right? Where was it banned?
I forget which country it was banned in, but it was it was banned in a country. There's a bunch of reviews. With these things, it's like, oh, it's a horror movie, so we assume that it's going to be scary. And so, like, a lot of what I do is I usually don't trust my any of my intuitions at first glance. So one of the first things I did is I went back to see about reviews at the time to see, like, wait, was this? It's not scary to me now. Maybe it was never scary. So I need to double check that. So I go back and check reviews and what people were saying at the time, and people thought it was very, very scary, which plays into what you're saying, because now I would say that most people would not find it as scary as maybe a modern horror movie. So you're right, the target does move, and that kind of plays into the idea that, like, fear is more than just the immediate quick fear of a jump scare sound. And that plays into into the idea of this slow fear concept. So a lot of what we find scary changes over time, over generations, as we get used to certain conventions. Like the idea of a Dracula has been played out so many times in so many movies that you really need to up the game in the modern era in order to kind of reclass this idea of scariness.
Oh, and I just realized earlier you talked about the entire process of destroying that violin and making a Frankenstein instrument. We have that video as well. I want to put that video in before we go any further in the outline. Can we pull up the making of the Frankenstein violin video?
I built an entire horror instrument in order to figure out what makes something sound scary. Now, if I asked a composer, they might say it has something to do with the timbre of the instrument in concert with certain compositional techniques. Appropriately placed dissonances, stinger chords, and things to do with tension and release. An acoustician, by contrast, might examine the anatomy of a scary sound and observe a high degree of roughness in their waveform. This is an acoustic property which refers to the rate at which the amplitude of a given sound changes. A property high in not just scary sounds, but also human screams. The neuroscientist might note that some types of fearful sounds are a purely mechanical process, oriented and actuated by a 5-neuron acoustic startle circuit embedded in our brains. And the psychologist? Well, they might discuss how our relationship with fear changes as we understand ourselves and the world around us better and better through the decades, implying that some fears are of our own making. I say it's a really complex question. Perhaps a full 30-minute deep dive into the complex realm of psychoacoustics is in order. Oh, hey, and look at that. That's exactly what I did. So if that's what you're interested in, go check out my video, What Makes a Sound Scary, over on my YouTube channel in the link in my bio. Hoping to get past 1,000 views on this one. That would be nice. So any support helps.
And that is all for part 1 of my interview with Levi McClain. We had so many notes that went into this episode that we realized we were forced to separate it into multiple episodes. Please join us next week at the same time on the same channel for part 2 of the interview with Levi McClain. We will finish talking about music theory, about neuroscience, about artificial intelligence, and the attempts to use machine learning to attempt to decipher whale language. Again, it'll be the same time, same channel next week. And that'll be part 2.